Hey, good morning, everyone. And it is the 28th of April, 2019, and welcome to our Genie seminar. As we know, we begin with the statement that this is being recorded for others who may want to learn about Genie seminars. So whatever you say is you're giving us the permission to use this as public. If so, be aware that what you do say, because we do intend to make this public. And we assume that your participation is also permission that we make these recordings available to others who would like to start Genie seminars. And this is especially pertinent now that the Zoom technology has done the wonderful thing that after a brief meeting with Josephine and myself and the Director of Education for Zoom programs, at the end of the meeting, they offered us 50 free licenses to use this Zoom technology for unlimited times. They will evaluate us through, I think, August, as they said, and see if they like what we're doing. It could even continue or do even more. So it's a wonderful opportunity we've gotten, and that's one of the reasons we hope these recordings would be available, as we would like to start a movement, actually, of Genie seminars around the world. The model we've been saying is the model of Alcoholics Anonymous, where two drunk men started a movement that is now available around the world, and it's a wonderful opportunity for people to engage in free, in this case, service for substance abuse. But our goal would be to offer free education in the skills that matter, especially Einstein's solution to create permanent world peace, happiness. Our message, of course, is summed up in the four help qualities: HELP, happiness, enough, love, and peace. So we welcome Bob Challenger to our group today, and maybe we could start if you could just say a word or two about yourself, Bob, and then we'll proceed. You need to unmute yourself. You need to unmute yourself, Bob. He doesn't know how. We'll unmute you.
No, I think there is no. Okay.
Oh, you don't have a speaker, I guess. Maybe
no,
that's.
No, he was just speaking, right? Just hold on 1 second. I'm not able to. 1 minute. I don't know what happened with Bob's.
Okay, we'll assume that you don't have a speaker or whatever with it, because we're not seeing a place to unmute you.
No, okay, it is done now. You can speak now.
Yeah, well, I couldn't. Yeah, I had to come back in because I moved my computer a bit and everything, my visual closed. So here I am. So
tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll go ahead with our meeting.
Okay, well, my name is Bob Challenger. I'm very active on Facebook. In fact, Don, I just sent you a message this morning speaking about an event that I'm working on. It's a global wave of love for 61 days, going from April 22nd, which was Earth Day, to June 21st, which is the summer solstice. And it's a global wave of love, peace, harmony, healing, abundance, and unity. So I have a call every morning at 11 a.m. on a conference call for people who want to talk about their participation in spreading this global wave. So that's the kind of thing I do on Facebook. I've got 4,990 friends there, and I'm on a number of groups. So anyway, that's the kind of thing I do. So I'm complete. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And maybe as we go on, you'll be interested in our Genie seminars. So we're looking to people who will be sponsoring Genie seminars to duplicate this educational process, which we think is relatively new and unique. So today, what I'd like to introduce as our topic, the question of why is it that we seem to not have any answer, any solution to the biggest puzzle that we're facing. Einstein told us that if we're going to preserve ourselves, avoid his prediction that people will use his formula to create weapons. I use the word weapons with ultimate destructive power, because when they're released or unleashed en masse, it's apparent that the next war will be over in 10 minutes, perhaps 12 minutes, and then won't be much left if all of these bombs would be released en masse by the push of a button, because any leader who feels he's under attack has 2 to 3 or 4 minutes to push his own button and release his own weapons. And we know that there are hundreds of these weapons already unleashed status. So the big question then, the puzzle is, why is it that we fill our world with fear, hate, scarcity, and war, when what we need and want is happiness, enough, love, and peace? These, we think, are the 4 qualities that would make a difference. But instead of having a solution, the major solution of the 9 countries that have these nuclear weapons goes under the acronym of MAD, Mutual Assured Destruction. And then Einstein told us that when we try to solve a problem using the same thinking that caused it, that's basically insanity. And one can say that maybe our world or the way we're thinking is insane. I personally happen to think that the message, as a matter of fact, my message today or thoughts is that what was sane, what was necessary for 3.5 billion years is suddenly insane, simply because now we're not confronting others with teeth and fists, or bows and arrows and sticks and stones, or bombs that kill a few people at a time. We're confronting others with weapons in mass that offer no second opportunity. Throughout history, we have resolved problems by physical confrontation. We didn't have a better way to do things than to confront one another when there were scarce resources. And now that we have this situation where there's no second opportunity to learn by our mistakes, we have to make them in a different way. And I think, again, when we refer to Einstein's brilliance, he said the way we can do that is our imagination. Imagination is the opportunity to use language to create stories. And when we create stories, we have the opportunity to describe who we are and what our purpose is. Some of our scholars have said the most important thing for us is they asked ourselves the question, who are we, and do we have a purpose? Do we have a meaning in this life? And we've had discussions about Barbara Marx Hubbard introducing the new story. Her new story is that we are actually, we're provided the ability to take responsibility for our own destiny. We have the ability to use words, and according to Einstein, we have the ability to use our imagination to create multiple stories in our mind. And we can do that without any penalty. We can engage in trial and error thinking, where we can make as many mistakes as we like, and it has no consequences to the physical world that we share. And that's a rather remarkable kind of insight. We have the ability, once we make these alternative choices in our mind, to look at them and then decide which ones make common sense. Put it another way, which ones fit the law of orderliness and predictability, or the scientific method, cause and effect. And if we get our story correct, then here's the key point that I think I'd like to offer you today. If we have our story correct, we have a trajectory of where we've come from in our history to the present. And once we have a trajectory that is accurate, we can predict the future. If we don't have an accurate trajectory, the future is not going to be very accurate. And the problem that we have today is that the language that we have created, and this is the point I'd like to make, the language we have today is such that is lacking the symbols that enable us to think into the future with an accurate story. So what is the story that guides us today? We've had many stories starting from the time we developed the ability to use language and create stories. The new story is that we've been around for 3.5 billion years. The first cell was created that long ago. And we didn't have language till about 50,000 years ago. So we've gone for 3.5 billion years with no story. And then when we created language, we've developed the ability to create stories, or we create imagination. So we have created, think about the stories that we've created. Our first stories were pretty much magical. We had ideas of things happening magically. How could we understand thunder, for example, or lightning? And we created stories such as we are the center of the universe, that the world is flat. We created stories that women who act kind of funny must be witches and we should put them to death to save their soul. And then we've created stories of multiple gods. And then came along and we created the story of one God. And one God that seems to be a particular kind of God. And I would say, see if you agree or disagree, that the dominant story that we've created is that there is a single God that now overalls all, but he seems to have favorites. He seems to favor certain tribes, certain religions, certain flags, and occasionally magically intervenes. That this God seems to be a God who's jealous and punishes people who don't obey his commandments eternally, which is a pretty stiff punishment to be in a pretty nasty place for eternity if you've done something that violates the rules. And it's a God that seems, for the most part, from my understanding, speaks mostly to men. He speaks to Moses and to Jesus and Mohammed and to the Pope and some males, and occasionally you have a female who claims that he speaks to them, but he seems to favor most of his communication with males, and that's a kind of and we kind of have to pray to that God, and if we don't do the right thing, so that's one dominant story, and we have someone like Neil Donald Walsh who's published a lot of books, and other people besides who said we have our story kind of all wrong. That who we are that's not really the kind of God that we understand. And then we have someone that comes along, others, and I guess this is Barbara Marx Hubbard's genius, that we have a creative force that we don't understand, but it's given us the ability within us, this magical ability, and maybe that's Einstein's brilliance, the magical ability to create stories using words that enable us to create accurate stories and predict the future. So if we can predict the future, you see, being able to predict the future enables us to direct our destiny. And so Barbara Marx Hubbard, remember when she ran she gave her nomination speech, she said we should have a peace room there we gather all the things that make life, world a better place, a more loving place. And then that evolved into what she called the office of the future. That if we can predict the future, we can wouldn't it be wonderful if we knew what the stock market would be next week? If we knew who would win the World Series at the beginning of the baseball season. Most of us would like that because probably we would be able to become very wealthy. But with the story that we're learning now is that maybe money isn't the answer, that there might be something more important that we think of as mental spiritual values, that if we can learn to, and that's again Einstein's message, if instead with the new way of thinking we can teach ourselves is to learn to cooperate, then we will develop a different kind of way of dealing with ourselves. And that's where we introduce the idea of a different kind of government. Instead of a capitalistic government, which is a game like Monopoly, where, you know, you throw the dice and things happen, and somebody wins everything. The end game is there's a winner and everybody else is bankrupt. That we sort of have that kind of, in a way, that kind of society. I know we've discussed this, and there we have some good, lively discussion because we have some healthy dissenting opinions about this. And I think we came in the last meeting or so that maybe it's not an either or, maybe it is a both and, that we can use this capitalistic idea. But if we could instead use some of our power to share, that is in a synchronistic, where our government is, we give some of our power to others, the power being, of course, the power of education, the power of health, the power of opportunity. And we're not just talking about more houses or more boats or more airplanes or more bombs or things like that. We're talking about what we think of the non-physical things: happiness, enough, love, and peace. So here's the bottom line, and I'll give you an example, and I think it would be worthwhile to, maybe we can jump off of this example. In January of 2018, we know that there was a false alarm in Hawaii. And during that false alarm, the official agency said, we are under nuclear attack. And the message was repeated over and over, and it ended each time with, this is not a false alarm. And what happened during those 38 minutes before they discovered it was an error? It's interesting to observe this. People were praying for the most part. They were bargaining with God, with their story of the Almighty. And much of the bargaining was, I will give up anything if you will stop this bomb. Take my money, take my whatever, but save my children, save my loved ones. And indeed, people were doing other things. They were calling their family and saying goodbye. It was noted they were parking their cars under bridges and putting children in sewers. You know, the idea that we'll be safe that way, of course, not a false statement. But that's the question I really raised for today. Why is it that moment when people had the assumption, they had the belief that the world was really in danger and we had very little time, that they were prepared to give up everything and say, I will give up my wealth, whatever, but save my children, my loved ones, and save me as well. But as soon as the warning was made a false notice, it was all forgotten, and we went back to the idea, more bombs, more mad is the way. And we, as of this day, we have no answer to that. So the question is, why is it that even though our most knowledgeable experts tell us it is only a matter of time before either someone or something or a mechanical error will push the button? And the experts that I'm familiar with say this will happen sometime within the next 10 years unless we do something dramatic to change things. That's the point of view. So now I pass the talking stick and ask you to share your genius and why is it that we tend to act this way. And it seems to me, my position is that we don't have the words, the language that enables us to really think this through. We're still operating on this old idea and this one sentence, what's good for me and my family for now and today, rather than the new meme that would change everything. What's good for my tribe and your tribe for now and the future?
Yeah, I think one thing.
I'll be next then.
I'm sorry. One thing that Pacey had brought up, and I'll give it right back to you, Bob, just very quickly. One thing that Pacey had brought up in previous calls many times is that we're not, as a species, not evolved enough yet to put, you know, when it's fight or flight. You brought it up many times, Don. You know, when we're in immediate danger, we're either, you know, we go back to our animal brain, and then once that immediate danger is gone, we go back to our normal ways. And so I echo Pacey, even though he's not on today, that I don't believe our species has evolved enough to get there. But I also agree with you, having the right language and the things that you're professing, I think, make a lot of difference. Bob, right over to you.
Thank you, John. So Barbara Marx Hubbard is still a very dear friend of mine, going back for 30 plus years. 30 years ago, I moved down to California to live in community with Barbara for an organization called Global Family. And on 15 days ago, she gave me a mission to do. I worked very closely with Barbara, and she said, create a 60-day event, a global wave of love between Earth Day and June 21st, the summer solstice. And that is what I spoke about earlier, because this is the way we can bring the world together, coming together for peace, love, peace, harmony, healing, abundance, and unity. And it's unity. Barbara was all about oneness. We are one under God. All people are created by the God that's in the New Testament, Don, not the one that you spoke about, which was in the Old Testament. And that had been they put human characteristics and attributes on God, which was exactly as you described it. But Jesus came to tell us that is not God. And it's all about love. So anyway, I encourage you to join this wave. I'm on Facebook, and every day at 11 o'clock, I have a conference call with people who are coming to support this wave. And it goes for another, we're on day, 7 now, I guess. So there's another 54 days before we get to the summer solstice. So that is a great solution. It's about bringing people together to realize we all are connected, and science is proving that, as well as the major religions. So I am complete. Thank you.
One thing just said, this is Josephine. Hi, Bob. Nice to meet you. And it sounds like a wonderful thing that you guys are doing. What kinds of things are you guys talking about on those calls?
We're talking about ways to come together in our own communities, especially leading up to the summer solstice. I'll be in Niagara Falls for that day on the Rainbow Bridge. That was the bridge that connects Canada and the US. And I'll be there at 11 a.m. to complete the celebration of what I spoke about, that Barbara gave to me to spread this word, which is a global wave of love, peace, harmony, healing, abundance, and unity, because we are all connected. We are all related. And so what we do for others, we do for ourselves as well. So that's what we're going to be doing. If you want to join the call, you can, Josephine, you can find, if you're on Facebook, well, I'll give you the number now. At 11 o'clock, I'll be on it. And it starts from 11 to 11:21. So if you have a pen, I'll give you the number to call.
Is this a dial? I'm not on Facebook. I was just interested.
Okay, so I can give you the number, though. Do you want the number?
I'll tell you what,
Yeah.
Bob, if you send me an email, we'll send it around to everyone.
That's a good idea.
Send me an email and we'll send it around.
Who said that?
This is Don speaking.
Okay, Don, yeah, I will.
Yeah, you have my email. Send it and then share it as
Okay, I'll do it that way.
so everybody will have that information. You can give a little description of it. But thank you for that contribution.
So why I was asking Don, it seems like a lot of what he's been saying is totally in line with the messages on our call. And I was just curious about the, we've been looking for synergies anyway. So I was looking for the, for the synergy. But just back to the point of today's call, I think, John, you said it right, in that as soon as as soon as there's any kind of challenge, we revert back to our old brain. It's really hard to stay on point in a critical situation. Like, how do we act on our genie brain in that kind of situation, right? There's no, I don't know, there's no way of behaving. We don't know what to do, so we just revert to what we know, which is the fight or flight. I can't even conceptualize how should we act on our new brain, in that kind of situation.
It's a wonderful question.
I think that we have to pick something to do that doesn't go along with our old habits. And I think right near the beginning, I remember Pacey talked about doing, kind of random act of kindness things, helping somebody who is panhandling or paying for somebody ahead of you on the line or behind you on a line at a fast food store. Do something different. Pick something and do it, just, to break it. Something that you think is positive, not do something that doesn't go along with your philosophy. But do it. One of the things that when we went for this Jack Canfield meeting on our cruise, he said, pick a goal, and then he sent another email. What have you done to help further that goal? That was you identified at the meeting, and that's important. Does somebody keep on your back? You say you're going to change. All right, what are you going to do? And have you done it? And when did you do it? Or when will you do it? And I think that sort of gets things moving more than, talking about it. I mean, I think you need to talk about it and think about it, but I think you have to do something too.
Yes.
So it starts with a vision of what's possible, but then a vision without action doesn't get anywhere. So I think the message is we've got to figure out what is the action that makes a difference. The example that I like to give is that to build physical muscles, you have to go and exercise. You can't pay somebody to do it for you. You have to actually be involved in doing it yourself. And develop mental muscles, the muscles we think of that have to do with a higher spiritual love, unconditional love. You have to first, I think, do the exercise of loving ourselves. That's why I think we started with our word switches. The most important basic ones was, if you remember, was emotional self-endorsement. We start with changing the way we think by changing the words we use that enable us to think in terms of cooperating instead of competing, and loving ourselves with the abundance that overflows to enrich the world. We said, at least I'm saying, that's the modern version of the golden rule. Learn to love ourselves with the abundance that overflows to enrich the world. It's hard to give away what we don't own. And that's why when we started these meetings a long time ago, we went right to the word switches. We didn't talk about explaining how or why they worked. Now we're really sort of getting more into the underbelly of this. Why is this effective? But we started by just starting with the word switches, and I think we begin to see how, these simple word changes, when you say, I allow and take responsibility for ourselves, or I could, instead of inviting ourselves to be responsible, instead of the should word, which is what other people tell us to do, or when we use both and instead of either. See, all these words they're simple and they're a limited number, but they're so critical. But that's, I think, the point, that we're not doing that. And that's why if we have Genie seminars where we start a movement where we have millions of people doing this, unless we're one group, but if we can duplicate ourselves, and this 50 license is such a wonderful opportunity. It's the way of changing the way we do things ourselves, and we teach others by example, not by demonstration. talking heads are interesting. I know you see me as a talking head sometimes, and I get criticized for that. But I'm really advocating the importance of our shared genius. That's when you all share your ideas, that we come up with the answers and the solutions.
Okay, we're talking further briefly. I think, Don, that the example you give of the Hawaii January 18th is just such a compelling place to start for why we need to have the conversation, number one. And now that I hear the evaluation is in August, well, I feel, as I said, it's the technological aspect. I'd really start them next week because we've been talking about, having conscious conversation circles here, and it would be so easy for me to put together a group of folks. But now, how to screen share and get your stuff on the screen, I don't know that. See, but I guess I want to know some of the things that I get as I'm out there feeling. How am I going to start this circle, and who I'm going to ask people? How do I know those things, John? I'm going to talk about the life, because there is a lot of the Christian belief that can't see beyond their own belief system for whatever reason. The Lord is going to come, and this whole 3 million, they don't want to talk about single cell organs of 3 million. And I kind of get these, how do you know? So I have a question of, how do you know about the language, of how we develop language? Is probably very simple for your scientific education. I should probably know the answer myself, but I don't. And then one of the things you said to us a few weeks ago that I think is so compelling for everyone to ponder is the most complex thing we observe out there is really ourselves. And and the more we know ourselves and the more we can understand ourselves, obviously the self-love just goes with it. So my question to you is, along the timeline of humans and their complexity, when did this self-esteem thing come into operation? And if you can elaborate on that for me. And those are just some of my thoughts. Thank you all for being here. I'll return the question.
Mhm.
You need to hear from Brad.
That's something I don't often hear anyone ever say to me. What would you like to hear, John?
Your views on this. What are your views on this?
I've expressed them previously, and I think that if to come back to it, I think one of the biggest problems we have in furthering this this endeavor is breaking down walls. People are so self-isolating, and I think the pace and the franticness, to coin a word, of life that we live by compels us to, with our very, very short attention span, veer away from concerns about things that are not tangible to us. And people also have, I think, by dint of the human spirit, an innate aversion to contemplate the horror of the end of their mortal lives in any kind of in something as once again horrific as some sort of nuclear event. And getting people to face that when they're trying to figure out how to make their next car payment is a very, very hard row to hoe, because what we're trying to do is get people to conceive of something that, once again, you can't reach out, touch, you can't put your arms around. It's really a matter of how far we can get people to expand their critical thinking and grasp of something that is foreign to them and something that they're not going to be day-to-day concerned with. And once again, I point as I did in a previous conversation, John, since you asked, and you'll probably start to regret asking me, is that
Never.
no, I appreciate that. Is that I still think that we're living in a September 10th thinking, and we need to be in a September 12th thinking, which promoted focus and unity on these matters. But as soon as, once again, human beings feel that there's some sort of an all clear, we go back to the unrewarding world of pay or die and everyday concerns that once again we can reach out and touch. And what we need to do is to stop isolating ourselves and to get together on this, and that's the mission here. Those are my thoughts.
Yep, I agree. I agree with your thoughts. We need to hear from Avi now.
Have you noticed that John took over the group, Don? He's now the master of ceremony. He's the
I think
birthplace of world peace.
he's practicing being a leader. That's all. That's good.
He's ready to go off on one of those contracts we have with Zoom.
I do have a couple thoughts. I was mulling them around and trying to formulate some of them. I think that there is maybe it's the human condition of basically being complacent, or back up a little bit. I think there's a question of what does it mean to be influential? You know, what do you say, and how do you present something that will cause somebody to change their way of thinking? And it's not so easy. I think of, it's not really clear which direction to go, so it's more, and it's not really compelling which direction to go. I'm thinking of two cases. One is, I saw something about around the Reagan administration. There was a scientist who gave a TED talk about kind of what he did to convince Gorbachev and Reagan to sign the nuclear treaties to start disarming. And, he had some very, very explicit, we did some studies. There was a bomb that goes off in one part of the world, and this is what we expect to happen right away, and then there's going to be a cloud that will probably cause a lot of devastation through the rest of the world. And that was scientific. It's somewhat compelling to me. I know I hear a lot of the experts feel something is imminent. To me, that's not that compelling, because there's a lot of experts that see something as imminent. For me personally. But when if somebody kind of says, well, here are the facts. We've kind of looked at this, and this is the way it plays out. It's not going to be just in Pakistan, and then you don't have to worry about it because it's on the other side of the globe. If it happens there is pollution that does really go everywhere. And here's the real results. To me, and this is to me, that's more compelling. And I have another example that I tell. This is a personal conviction of mine about eating meat or eating domesticated animals. That I woke up and I saw a movie about how where animals are raised for meat consumption, and it's kind of like a concentration. It's very, very scary stuff for me. It was enough for me to look at it and say, I don't want to promote that, so I'm going to stop eating meat. So I'm going to stop giving my resources that are going to support that. And when I think about the animals and I think about the conditions, it's compelling to me to make a difference. I've talked to my other members of my immediate family who love meat and love to eat. The world revolves around food. And I know that, when they see a cat walking by, it's kind of like it's full of love and it's great appreciation. And, the world stops when a furry cat walks through. But, if I kind of would bring up the idea of, well, what about the little cows and all the little animals, how they're treated? How does that, how would that sit with you? And I think, if you actually saw it, it would sit very uncomfortably with them. But they're still meat eaters, as many people are, and so choose, which I respect. But there's not, there's this, in my mind, is a little bit of a discontinuity that on one hand, I really care about things that are living, and on the other hand, I'm kind of used to this lifestyle where I've grown up and everybody's gotten accustomed to, and I just don't want to think about it. And life sort of goes on. I think that's sort of the similar issue with this, that it in my mind, it has to be painfully obvious before you actually do get something that changes status quo. I guess there's probably some psychology about this kind of stuff as well, that when you're confronted with a gazillion different choices, you kind of just retract or withdraw and go with what your fight or flight instincts are, and you're kind of stuck in there.
You've offered an even better, Avi, a better example of the point that I made just a moment ago, because you're talking about the far-reaching consequences of a certain behavior that nobody's in touch with, because they're only dealing with the close-up consequences of it. Nobody, well, I shouldn't say nobody, most people do not think the way you've just thought when they go and they order a Big Mac. Okay? They don't think that it was once mooing and giving milk. The same thing with a chicken sandwich. I think chickens are very amusing, quite frankly. They always make me laugh. There's something inherently funny about a chicken. I don't know why, but they just make me laugh. And I don't think of that when I look at it on the rotisserie. And I probably should, but I don't. I have a business partner who is a wonderful friend who will not eat meat. And he won't go on at length about it, but he'll look at me and he'll say, "It's my deal with the universe." It's my deal with the universe. And I understand precisely what he means. But you're not thinking, I think to summarize it, you're not thinking about the far-reaching consequences with a behavior that just seems as normal to you as getting up in the morning.
I think that's true. I think change is hard, and habituation it's a hard nut to crack, and that's a little bit what we're trying to crack with this. And I think it's certainly helpful, I think, to recognize it, that is a bit of the human condition. I share my thoughts, not because I'm thinking that everybody should change and do it my way, but I think there's a little bit of this. There's a bit of an example here that if somebody says, well, it is important enough for somebody to actually make a stand at it. Yeah, that to me is more compelling than you should or experts say and whatnot. Those are my thoughts. That is, what is it that's compelling, and different things are compelling to different people. But the idea that there's somebody over there that says it's going to happen. The reasoning is pretty good. I just as I go back and say, a guy who's telling me that here's how a bomb in Pakistan plays out. I got to say, I was thinking before this that, well, if it's in Pakistan, it really isn't global destruction. It's going to be, a small kind of fringe part of the world on the other side of the world. And, that will be the Hawaii event that's real and then has a little bit more currency or a little bit of more staying power or sticking with people. But then when I actually heard somebody talk about it, I said, well, it's not just over there. There is fallout even from one of these things going off, even if it's not the whole shooting works that goes off. So I don't know. There is some element of what does it mean to be influential, and the debate seems to be getting a harder argument since there's so many people. You say, if I have a really good story about the past, I can predict the future. That seems to be getting further from what the political and the social experience is, because it seems like there's a lot of people who have really heartfelt ideas on what the history is and where things are moving forward. So to compel somebody to do something, logic and reason was one of the good ways to do it, and that's becoming a little bit more in short supply. I go back to my friend William F. Buckley and Firing Line, who I thought was very convincing because he had good arguments, not because he yelled a lot. And George Will, sort of another more recent character who is a talking head, but usually comes back and says, here's the facts. And to me, he's very, very compelling.
So, Abhi, you and Brad, you both brought in some good points compelling me to speak. Is first of all,
Hey, John, how come you didn't ask Sharad to speak?
today was a great discussion. I was listening in. One of the things I want to give, because we are making this public, I want to, Don is very old and I still have many years to live, I hope. And I'll give a disclaimer. Don used the word Muhammad. I had nothing to do with it. So I don't know about that. So that's a disclaimer. But having said that, so one of the things is, Obi, no need to worry about Pakistan's nuclear weapons. It has nothing to do with me being from India. I seriously doubt their claims of having any kind of weapons or nuclear weapons, because no country is exporting them. So their own nuclear weapons, I don't know if they work. So no need to worry. Honestly, the bigger worry is this. What is the right word for it? Is this thought process? That is a bigger problem for me. This jihadi thought process, which is now showing over the past 3-4 years, it has shown its true colors. The impact of that is so huge that countries which had never seen jihadi or Islamist terrorisms, like Sri Lanka recently, 200 people dead, and then just 2 days ago during investigation somebody blew them up and they killed 5 children in the same house. So if they can kill their own children, you can imagine what they are going to do for others. There was a video of this terrorist going into the church, and he patted a child on the way. Can you imagine somebody going into a church is patting a child? What is the mindset? It's not like somebody is, as they show in movies, somebody is very passionate or somebody is bucking himself up that I have to do this for Allah. It's not. It's like a casual thing for that person to do. That is very, very scary for me. Just remember 3 years ago what happened in Europe. Europe had never seen terrorism, but somebody hires a truck, kills 100 people. So that is what I think. What Don, you are bringing. The real challenge is not weapons of mass destruction. The real challenge, probably for me, is the mindset which has access to these weapons of mass destruction, and that is why we need this newer way of thinking, because the old way of thinking is so powerful that it can make any of these people who blindly believe a single book or a single god or a single person in their lives, that they can go to any length that and unfortunately for us, what is happening, those who are overloaded with media, we are getting numb to these ghastly acts of violence, whether they are gun violence or terrorist act or any kind of violence, as just the next thing. Why? Because we are not directly getting impacted. Whenever I go to New York or New Jersey, I pass by Sandy Hook. Thankfully, that reminds me of what kind of ghastly things that human beings can do. So,
yeah, I agree with you. I think Brad and Avi made great points on, Brad on being tangible, things being tangible, and then Avi on what is influential, because those two things to me bring to light the recentness of what happens, right? So a bad thing happens, it's tangible, it's recent, and it's influential. And if we could duplicate those things, when I say duplicate those effects, I think we could spread things. And this is the effect that I have. Let me just show you this. My screen froze, and it was left with this. And if we can all be left with this, then I will tell you we will all be in a much better place. And that is just a fantastic thing. I'm going to make this my screen background forever and ever. So I'll leave you guys with that a little bit.
John, I will pay you $20 a month never to do that again.
John, if you can share it, we can put on the homepage of the website.
I think that would be the thing that could send us over what we want to do, because this is how you make yourself happy and loving, and you just join us and you will have that effect.
Yeah, Josephine was trying to do some A/B testing, but I think this will increase the sign up.
Now, on a serious note, you know what happens? There was a research done a few years ago, and it said that a small child, you know, an infant, they smile almost 200 times in a day. 200 times in a day. And many of them, they don't understand jokes. They don't understand. They don't need internet. And they don't have access to, like, you know, Brad is coming here and he tells from the best jokes of the week for me. You know, we as adults, how many times do we endeavor to smile in a day? It's very, we need of the best joke, somebody sending the best message to even bring a smile on a weekday. So,
you know, our group causes me, this is another increment in my life where I think, at least for an hour or two on Sunday mornings, about the ungodly consequences of what we're trying to set off a chain reaction to avoid. I was given to understand that as a small child in the 1960s, after the Cuban Missile Crisis, and again in the 1980s, when America's consciousness was brought around again to nuclear devastation. And then I go back and, you know, I don't think about it as often as I probably should. But interestingly enough, what I do think about on a regular basis is a smaller version of this, which is horrific and survivable. And I can't help wondering, if we can't reach people collectively through reason and provoking the necessary vision that we're trying to provoke, what happens, because what I think is infinitely more possible in this world today, technologically, is for someone to go running around in a major stadium or an airport or Grand Central Station or something like that with some sort of limited nuclear capability in a backpack. That worries me, because I keep thinking in terms of there's nothing politically, scientifically set up to safeguard against that happening. So if that were to happen, does this become the catalytic event to create the mass consciousness that we're trying to create? And God knows, I hope it never happens. But I have a funny feeling that it's eminently more possible and potential than the destruction that ends all mankind. Thoughts?
Yeah, let me comment for a second. I think Sharat hit on something. I think we're talking about a new way of thinking, right? But there is already a new way of thinking. And that new way of thinking is quite depressed. I mean, you look in research is proving this out. People are turning away from, religion and God. Atheism is on the rise. Satanism is up. I just got a religious status, if you will. The younger generation sees no future. They're not hopeful. This is I think this is a crisis, not just in the United States, but in the world. So I think, and it's just me talking, that people who have no hope, the only way they see that some way to affect their future is to end their life and take as many people as they can with them. Destruction becomes their, the vision for the future. Tear it all down. Let's start over, or let me destroy something I think is antithetical to what I want to see happen. I think what was a uniting force for us in the past, which is good and hope and God, and I'm not saying everyone needs to believe in God, but I don't know what the new morality is at this point. I don't know what the new hope for the future is. And until we have that, no one is afraid of nuclear weapons anymore. They're creating them in their basement. You know, they're not afraid of dying because they're blowing people up and themselves. They're shooting people. So I don't know I don't have an answer. This is just my observations. So thank you.
I think it's dead on, and I absolutely agree with that. And although I've not always been a huge fan of organized religion, there sure as heck is a purpose for it in uniting people and getting people to consider the precepts of peace, which is constantly expressed through organized religion. And it is dismaying, and I'll go along with this, Josephine. It's dismaying to see every little bit of symbolism regarding this to be scrubbed out of our culture. And it seems to be the new vogue. And your question is, what is the new morality? The new morality is an unmorality. And that isn't doing anything to place us on the trajectory that we're talking about here.
We can simply decide to smile every day. I think Obi's picture which John shared is going to make my week now. I just do what Don tells me. Close my eyes, imagine Obi smiling whenever I face any any hardships this coming week.
There you go.
Smile, Obi. Very nice smile.
Those smiles are free. I'll give a smile to everybody and anybody.
I think that the hope we have is that when we can teach ourselves an accurate story of who we are, we learn that we are, as some of the brightest people are telling us, we are moral, spiritual beings. We are humane becomings. We're not simply individuals who have knowledge. We're not just Homo sapiens sapiens, the species that knows, because knowledge, we know, can be used for constructive and destructive purposes. Knowledge allows us to love one another, but knowledge also allows us to make bombs that destroy one another. What we're missing is how to use knowledge to create wisdom. You know, wisdom is having an understanding of what works, and it gets back to cause and effect again. When we have a trajectory of our past to the present, and it's accurate, we see that there's been something that has to do with there is as Einstein told us, there is a world of orderliness and predictability. And if we realize that we can identify what that scientific orderliness is, that we can make a difference by creating our future. That was Barbara Marx Hubbard's message, I think. We need an office of the future where we can do that. But I also, as Bob said, he had some conversations with Barbara. I remember her saying as well, because I've been involved with her at 3 conferences in the West Coast with her and retreats and so on. So I remember her saying something that was very telling. She said, "I'm very good at inspiring people to follow me. They really believe this idea that we have to change the world, and that each of us has this ability to do something that makes a difference. We each have a purpose in life, and we each have a desire to do something meaningful to contribute." But this was the telling statement. She says, but when they then come to me and say, "Now, what do I do about it?" That's Josephine's question. When they say, "What do I do about it?" I don't know what to tell them. I don't know what to say. I'm afraid, now that they're interested, I'm afraid they will ask me, "What do I do?" And I don't know what to say. And I think that is our challenge. And I think we do have the answer now, is what I'm conveying to you. I think what we've learned from our history, the more accurate we learn our story, and we realize that for 3.5 billion years, we've been brought up learning to solve our problems by physical confrontation. We didn't have any better way. For 3.5 billion years, we didn't have any story. We solved problems by war. And war was helpful. War was the driver of peace. wars ended in peace. Wars was the driver of evolution. You know, whoever had the greater technology and was the wisest at that time conquered the weakest. And that's why the world has changed over a period of time. And then what happened 300 years ago, we came out of the Dark Ages and we discovered the scientific method. We discovered that there is the world of orderliness and predictability. And all of a sudden, we've developed this rapid growth of science where now we've developed such great power because of the internet and our technology that we become so powerful that we're ready to destroy ourselves. We use our power negatively, but we can also use it positively. And I think this is the key issue, that the words we've created, when we finally develop the ability to tell stories, the stories we've told are ones that have language that directs us to either or ways of thinking. That's the big message from Einstein. The way we've been thinking is that it limits ourselves to right and wrong, good and bad, us or them. That's why we end up in confrontation. And when we teach ourselves the new language, so we've got to get away from this idea that it's, you know, we have to understand what we mean by love. You know, I think when Katie raised the issue of this, where did this idea of self-esteem come from? It's fairly relatively recently that we realized the importance that we have the ability and the responsibility to love ourselves with the ability to with the energy and abundance that overflows to enrich others. We create the love ourselves, but we've been going through life feeling that in order to be loved, we have to have beautiful things. We have to look beautiful. We have to have beautiful things. We have to have power. We have to have physical wealth. And it's that way that we've learned over a period of time. And as long as we have that kind of language that dominates ourselves, it gets back to the new language. So I'm just going to drop two words here that we've heard before, but I think this is one of the critical issues. Two of the words we need to invent and that I've created them are trigger words and word switches. A trigger word is not in a language, but a trigger word is any of those category of words that call forth what worked in the past. It triggers what we've already inherited in our DNA, and it's words like our tribal words. It's like our religious words that say "my way is the right way," or our flags at my right, or the political flags, or the should words that say "do what I say." That's the correct way. And we have a new word. A word switch is a word that says that directs our energy not from our old brain, our animal brain, to our new brain, where we can common sense and rational thinking can overcome our emotional attitude. No one wants to give up what's comfortable to them. What's comfortable to them is money and power and fame and attractiveness and so on. That's what's been popular for our history. And to get out of that, it's getting into an uncomfortable state to give up some of that and say, as our most wealthy people now who found that they have all the money that they can use and more, and people like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, and recently our richest man in Connecticut are telling other millionaires and billionaires, you have to give your money for the benefit of the rest of the world.
Yep.
You know, Ray Dalio just donated $100 million for education. And that's exactly what some of the people who now find that they've got all that wealth, but they're still not happy. It still hasn't brought about peace. You know, the world, they still can be blown up in a day. And when that happens, when they get that threat, in Hawaii, when the threat went off, I don't think anybody was thinking about how much money they had. They weren't thinking about whether they were attractive or not. They were thinking about what's really important to them. Who are the people we love, and who are the people that are meaning and the values that are meaningful to us? And it's basically the love they have for other people. And we don't realize that we're still caught up in different ways. So we are running a little bit late, and I invite your last comments before we close our meeting. But I hope you'll give a little thought to these two words, tribal, the words that are tribal, such as a, I'm sorry, the first word is a trigger word, any word that triggers off the old way of thinking. And there's a whole category of words in our language, but we have very few words that are word switches. And that's what we started off with our original meetings with. What are these simple word switches? I allow, I could, both and leads us to oneness, the idea we're all connected. And that the fifth word switch was the critical one. What works for me and my tribe and your tribe for now and the future? We're not thinking that way. We're thinking what's good for me and my family for here and now. So last comments, please. Before we end our meeting, share your wisdom.
I think if we're going to be successful, I think we need to figure out the message of hope. And I think the message of hope is, it could be happiness, enough love and peace. But I think people are searching for, yes, those things, no doubt. But I think they're searching for something that's right in front of their face, like something that's immediate. I don't know. This has to start with us. I agree. All of these changes, needs to start with us. But if we're going to spread the message, we need to figure out the message of hope that people are going to resonate to. And I think that's what our youth is looking for, which is why I think depression is so high. They certainly are not seeing it in the government. I'm talking about world politics, not just in the US. And I think that the governments have failed the people by and large. And the church has now failed the people. So what becomes, if the people are now going to if we're going to self-rule, we've given up our gods, we've given up our government, what becomes that message of hope?
Boy, that was a mouthful, Josephine. Giving up our gods and giving up our governments.
I'm going to get that on a t-shirt.
Well, if we haven't given up on ourselves, maybe we ought to try to do something before the next meeting that shows we haven't given up on ourselves. Give of ourselves to someone else, or appreciate someone who's doing it right. Try to think of something. I will.
That's a wonderful message. And I think, to me, that's the message that we learn from the new story. The new story, as I understand it, is that it's not that we get on our knees and ask God we bargain with God that we'll give up good things that we have if He'll take care of us. I think the new story is that whoever this of our Creator is, whoever that Creator is, we've been given already the ability to be responsible for ourselves. We've been given the ability to create the answers. And now it's up to us to do the work. So, in other words, we are the ones who have been given the opportunity to direct our future. Avi, when you move your chair. So we are the ones, I think, is a message. And this group is one of many groups like us. We're relatively unique. There are other groups like us, but it's the idea that if we can we are the ones who are the most advanced people to make the change. I don't expect that a child who's not knowledgeable, hasn't been educated, is going to make the change. I don't expect anyone who's been brought up to believe that the correct way to believe is that if you cut off other people's heads to please the God up above, that will make the world all good and right. I believe that we on this group and people like us, through this process of sharing our genius, and by doing it in large numbers, is the way that we can really make a change. And it's not an easy job, but I really believe that's where my hope is. That an optimist, I think we can do it by the kind of process we are engaged in right here. And we've gotten this opportunity, for example, just the Zoom opportunity to start new possibilities, new groups who could start groups. Remember the first life, the most important first life are the simple cells, the protozoa. You know, and the protozoa, they procreate, they make 500 generations. We know that simple life, one of the ways they survive is by making 500 generations in their lifetime. In each of those 5 generations, each of those individual generations makes 500 generations. So you see the importance of growing in numbers. And if we can grow in numbers like that, not by making 500 offspring, but by making 500 groups of people who share their genius, I think that's where we'll succeed. Thank you all for sharing.
This is Bob. Kathy Roberts and I want to start a Genie Zoom call together. And how do we do that?
Okay, that's wonderful. If you would do that, that would mean if Kathy went away, there's no reason that one person has to be the leader. You can have 2 people or 3 people who share the leadership. And all the leader does is have to arrange the people to come together. But we'll be in touch with you because that's exactly what we're working on during our business meetings, Bob. But we'll be in touch with you soon, and we would certainly welcome you being one of the first new Genie groups. And I think once we get started and we break through, we will fill up these five licenses, and people will want more. And I think Zoom, once they see that we're using these productively and eventually building their program, or we're actually building their program for them when we use these free meetings, they will want to give us more. They've already said that if they like what we do, they'll even give us greater sponsorship. So we're in a very good position, I think. So, okay, well, thank you all, and we'll sign off now, except for a few of us who are going to be for Basu and Rini has joined us. Rini is in a business meeting, so she can only come late. So thank you all.